Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in.
Welcome back, everyone. This time I'm joined by a team of experts from our friends at Cisco, and we're going to be talking about the topic of digital resilience is now business resilience, and how it is just an inescapable topic of conversation for every organisation on the planet. Would you like to introduce yourself so everyone knows who they're talking to, please?
Hi, my name's Joachim Manson. I lead a partner sales organisation for Cisco in the UK and Ireland. We do pretty much all of our business through our partners, and it's me and my team who are responsible for that.
Hi, I'm Fitton. I'm the leader for Cisco's Cloud and AI Infrastructure Group. So we're a team of specialists inside Cisco that help our customers and partners with all things to do with the AI-ready data center.
And I'm Scott Manson. I run the cybersecurity sales go-to-market for Cisco in UK and Ireland.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. So for everyone listening, we're going to be diving into the demands and trends impacting business risk, AI, networking, data center, security, etc., all focused around now how we build a more digitally resilient business so that everyone can grow and survive in this ever-challenging world, and realistically how we can start leveraging data as that foundation for making better decisions. So this time we're going to focus a little bit more on the data center and hybrid cloud part of the conversation, but I think it's probably worth just contextualizing why we're doing that to start with. And we talked a little bit about Cisco's sort of refocus and the new team under a product officer in part one, and how that's helping drive a platform outcome from a customer perspective. But where are the focus areas, Joachim, for Cisco going forwards, and how does that actually relate to this data center conversation we're talking about today?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we have seen that reorganization, which is really about stitching together and making sure that we have got something which is integrated but also focused on ultimately the main challenges that our customers face. So there's three main areas that we would describe as our capability, or the challenges or the outcomes that we're trying to deliver. One is around AI-ready data centers, so we're going to talk a little bit about that in this episode. The other is future-proof workspaces. So we all have lived through the last few years of where people work, how you consume your data, your applications, etc. So what does that mean for you from a workplace perspective, be that individually or in the office? So that's a real focus area for us, and the whole bit being underpinned right around digital resilience. So as we've talked about, digital resilience is no longer an option. It's fundamental to the very resilience of business, and of course that's the third and one of the most important areas of our.
Yeah, I think it's important. We're going to spend a whole episode on that topic. So I think it is super important. But we're going to touch on the AI-ready data center piece today. And Jed, this is your sort of baby in an area, but let's maybe just part the AI part of that conversation for a little bit, because there's still a significant hybrid cloud conversation that needs to be had in most organizations, and finding the right place to run a workload that's going to give the best value to the business. What are you seeing outside of the AI conversation? What are you seeing in the sort of hybrid cloud and data center space as the sort of big customer conversations and trends?
So I suppose, and I'm glad you said about dropping the AI bit from the AI-ready data center, because the reality is most of the conversations we're having with customers are around modernizing applications. So in that context, what we're seeing more and more now is customers getting to grip with the principle behind hybrid cloud. And you touched on it, Rob, about the principle of putting the right workload in the right place at the right time at the right cost. And customers are still dealing with that challenge. They're trying to determine about whether or not they remain in the cloud, whether they keep that workload in a private data center. So all of the challenges that customers faced maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when sort of cloud, I suppose, really began to find its feet as a principle, whether or not that's private or public, is still very relevant today. And a lot of things have happened in the industry recently. I mean, we're obviously all very familiar with some of the announcements that Broadcom made and the impact that had on VMware, that has also sort of brought in a very, very different angle to the way customers are considering modernizing those environments. And modernizing not just for the sake of it. The reality is that customers have also got a choice about their operating model. I mean, simplicity remains paramount, an important part of operating it. A single pane of glass is certainly something I think every customer strives for. The principle about whether or not the workload is in the cloud or it's on-premise, it's at the edge of infrastructure. They want that simplicity, that simple operations model. But there's also an opportunity for customers to consider, more modern application environments. So we are absolutely seeing the trend as customers consider moving away from virtual machines to container technologies. And again, that's driving another sort of set of conversations with customers. But at the end of the day, it comes back to a tenet I said right at the beginning. It's ultimately about doing it all for the right reasons. And customers constantly move through this flow about sometimes they're looking for architectural elegance, and that gets them simplicity, but that comes with a cost burden or a complexity burden. And what we're spending a lot of time with customers doing is trying to find what that middle ground is for customers, and also giving them choice at the end of the day, because customers have very different workloads. Believe it or not, there are still an enormous amount of, and I've worked for Cisco and been in the industry a long time, there's going to be VMs around for a long, long time. So the death of the VM is definitely not something that will happen in my lifetime, but the sort of birth and the ongoing acceleration and development of things around containers is something that we're beginning to see more and more and more now. But also giving customers choice around the architectural decisions they make. So if they want a traditional three-tier model and go with their favorite storage vendor in a traditional sort of stack of modern infrastructure, that's great. Whether they want to go with hyper-convergence to build it as a more integrated stack, it's really, really important for us and our partners to offer choice. And I think most customers, it's very rare we come off a customer that is exclusively in the cloud or exclusively on-premise. We need to be able to give them choice, because most customers that we talk to have actually still got quite complex environments, but they just want that complicated environment just simplified a little bit, just into 2 or 3 swim lanes of technology with that sort of mythical, magical, single sort of seamless pane of glass to sort of operate it. That's typically what we're seeing with customers.
And I think there's a network fabric part of that as well that needs to be really important, because if we want to use data, which is what everyone wants to do, when we're talking about, we're generating this at the edge, we want to do some processing, analytics in the center somewhere, that connected fabric that underpins everything is super important as well, I think, and it sometimes gets lost in the conversation. Well, we've got a data center and we've got a bit of this and a bit of that, but actually how do we stitch that all together and do that in an operationally simple manner is not always the easiest job. And especially when we're still talking about virtual machines in a lot of cases, networking and IP addressing is a challenge. And you talk to someone and say, do you want to move a bunch of VMs from this location to that location? The first team that's likely to have a bit of a heart attack is going to be the network team. I think like, how are we going to make that work? Network policies, security policies, NAT rules, public IP addresses, internal IP addresses, they're all big challenges for moving virtual machines around, which is why containers for me are actually super important, not necessarily because they can run in the cloud, but because they can be a lot more portable. They're usually built as code, so they can be redeployed, re-architected a lot easier than the construct of a VM that comes with a 5-year OS lifecycle shift and a whole host of security vulnerabilities. But yeah, it's a shame they're not going anywhere. Certainly, probably in my lifetime or anyone's that's listening to this, we'll be still talking about virtual machines for a long time. So I guess through all of that, then there's a theme that came again from Cisco Live, was this value of the Silicon One conversation within Cisco. Why is it, Jed, so important that Cisco still own the silicon part of that conversation? Because a lot of people don't. They buy from one of the standard outlets there from that, but you guys have made a very conscious choice not to do that.
Yeah, the principle behind silicon is a sort of a, no pun intended, a bit of a fabric behind the engineering about what we do inside Cisco. There's a lot of amazing generic merchant silicon out on the market, and there are companies out there that make great products built on merchant silicon. But we felt many, many years ago, our common hardware engineering group that basically were the architects behind Silicon One, felt that what we wanted to do was have that ability to go right the way down from the silicon all the way up to the operating system, this full stack approach. gave us the flexibility to, we believe, build some of the most innovative products that we've certainly been building over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. And that's because we've had control of the ASIC, we've had control of the development around Silicon One, and has enabled us to do things that, frankly, we probably would have struggled to with merchant silicon. And I suppose when you're a manufacturer, the advantage of building your own silicon is it puts you in control of your timeline around your product development cycle. But the reality is we're moving very, very quickly to becoming more of a software company. I can't remember the exact numbers. I'm sure it's in the mid to low 50s about where we are from a software revenue perspective. But hardware is still a really important part of Cisco's business. And an enormous amount of innovation can come from silicon. But it isn't, in a way, it's not just about Cisco silicon as well, because silicon partnering is a really important part of our business as well. So very recently, we've announced a co-engineering effort with NVIDIA. Probably many people on the podcast are very familiar with, I don't think anyone has not heard of the name NVIDIA.
I wouldn't have thought so.
And watch their escalating share price and maybe some course correction that's going on at the moment for a multitude of reasons. But we've also recognised as well that, going back to the point I mentioned earlier about choice, the reality is customers aren't always wedded to one vendor. And what vendors need to do is that when NVIDIA have got their silicon and Cisco has got its silicon, we need to have operating models for customers that allow those things to be effectively merged together. But that gives the customer the flexibility of being able to build with multiple vendors to get the common benefit of silicon from Cisco and silicon from NVIDIA. So Silicon One, an incredibly important tenet about everything that we build inside Cisco, but we also recognize the fact that that is not unique to us. A number of companies that are building great technology products, but the partners that are really important to us, we want to partner with silicon, and that's all about giving our customers choice about those operating systems. But what we can't afford to do is abandon the customer at that point. If we're going to bring two sets of silicon together from two vendors, we need to turn up with an operations model that's simple for the customer. We can't ask the customer to do that.
Yeah.
Their partner, we've got to bring those two things together.
No, that makes sense. And I think what we can say there is that we've got a networking fabric built on silicon through software to give us all the innovation from a connectivity perspective. We've got probably a decade plus now of UCS innovation and capability in the compute space. We've got the partnerships in the software space with all the different hypervisors, with Nutanix, with the data protection vendors that are out there that are integrated to the ecosystem, and some great connections between Cisco networking, say, and Nutanix software-based networking to simplify the operations piece. That drives our extension into the cloud and allows us to run all the different types of workloads that we've talked about. I think that's just such a great choice for a customer then. Bare metal, hypervisor 1, hypervisor 2, this silicon, that silicon, but all, like I say, under a single sort of management and operating plane is super important.
And probably, Rob, just to add to one thing, is that this data center conversation as well, what we also are much more cognizant of, and Joachim touched on it when he talked about digital resilience, is it's not just about the data and the data center, wherever that data center is, because, I mean, we had a phrase a number of years ago, is that a data center is wherever your data is, and that can literally be anywhere, is we also need to think about observability. We need to think about security. So how we secure these environments and then how we observe these environments well is just as important as the underlying data itself. So data center is an incredibly important topic, but now we're actively encouraging conversations with customers to, at the same time they're considering their data center strategy, to also then think about how are they going to observe that environment, and then most importantly, how they're going to provide that digital resilience wrapper around it to protect that data.
That makes sense, and we can certainly dig into the detail of that digital resilience piece in part 3, which will be super exciting. We've got just a couple of minutes left, and we're going to have to circle back to the 2 letters for the swear jar. But what specifically, I guess, Jed, are we doing from that AI-ready data center perspective? We could talk about AI in a product, co-pilots and all that sort of stuff, but if you need to build something yourself because of sovereignty, capability, cost, whatever it is, the likelihood is you have to deploy some level of infrastructure somewhere to support that. And how is Cisco working to simplify that for customers that maybe aren't used to building AI supercomputers and managing them like certain other sectors may have done for years?
So it's a really good question, and I suppose part of it is to try and remove a bit of the hype, and that hype is probably one of the things that's been a bit of a polluting effect in a lot of these conversations. So the first thing we'd advocate is the principle of why we called it AI-ready data center, and there's a very important word in there, and the word ready. That doesn't mean you build an AI data center, it means a data center capable of supporting AI workloads in the future. And of course, AI workloads can run very well on Intel and AMD sort of CPU architecture. They don't necessarily need to run on very, very expensive NVIDIA technologies, but there is a multitude of different GPU technologies out there as well. So we're advocating the whole principle about preparing for AI. As I mentioned earlier, 90 to 95% of what we are doing is still around application modernization and hybrid cloud. It's early days for enterprise to really start getting into the sort of detail about building dedicated infrastructure. Unless you're an incredibly large bank or you're a hyperscaler, and we've all read the stories in the newspapers about some of the investments that have been made in this space. The reality is, I think we're just on the cusp of enterprises now beginning to start seriously considering about adopting AI in a true production way.
And we're not really talking about them being multi-billion-dollar investments either, are we? They could be something a lot more sensible to deliver an outcome. So if anyone's listening thinking, I can't do AI because all the news articles says I've got to spend hundreds of millions, that isn't realistically the starting point for this stuff, is it? So it's a lot more easy to access once you get a business outcome attached to it.
Exactly. It goes back to just what you touched on there. You used the word outcome, and we are very, very keen to when it comes to AI, to really double down on the use case. Spend a lot of time working with your partner and figuring out what is the use case you're trying to build and what is the right technology to build it. And I suppose the weather eye that you need to have is making sure that as you are building out this next generation modern data center infrastructure, you have a weather eye on making sure that is ready to take AI workloads in the future. So our big focus at the moment is sort of wanting to guide customers to make sure they focus on that use case first, make sure they're actually then building, and then using things like Cisco validated designs, design principles that come from your partners like CDW. So ultimately what you're doing is you're making sure that you don't end up creating more sprawl because of AI. You can make AI actually fit around your business and not necessarily the other way around.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Thanks for that. I mean, that's, I think, great summary of hybrid cloud is the conversation. Think about what you're doing from an application perspective, drive that modernization of your technology stack and simplification and integration piece, and have a weather eye on where AI is going to fit into that, and make sure that you're ready for that when it comes, so you're not then caught behind, whether it's from a connectivity perspective, compute, storage, wherever it happens to be. Thanks for listening, everyone. I've been Rob Sims, Chief Technologist for CDW.
I've been Joachim Mason, leader for partner sales, Cisco UK and Ireland.
And Jed Fitton from Cisco and our cloud and AI infrastructure team.
And I've been Scott Manson.
Thanks, guys, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
Today's episode. Be sure to check out the back catalogue for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.